at one point I called on Collie and I was like, I'm miserable. I'm like, and I didn't, and my girlfriend was like, I don't know if you want to do that. Like, I don't know if you fully understand what that means. And I'm like, no, it'll be fine. Literally, like within 3 months, my successful business fucking implodes.
This is Leah Steele, aka The Wealth Witch, and this is my podcast. I'm here to activate you to remembrance of your divine birthright to be wealthy in all areas of your life. This podcast is for people ready to have controversial conversations about the financial control, manipulation, and tyranny that faces humanity today.
I'm gonna live in freedom. I'm gonna live my destiny. I'm gonna live my freedom. I'm gonna live, the time is right now.
The Wealth Witch. It's for the people who are ready to wake up, deconstruct their wealth programming, and free themselves from the financial slavery consciousness that serves the global financial agenda. I'm committed to realizing a new global wealth paradigm where economic freedom is the reality and where you get to design and live the life of your dreams. Now let's do the damn thing.
I had a cancellation today, had an hour-long session where a client canceled, and I decided that I would take the time to hop in and talk a little bit about my money story and how clearing has changed everything for me. And I'm just doing that because a couple people had asked about that and had wanted to know more about it. So I just figured I would take this time, didn't have anything on my schedule, figured I would take this time to come in and do that, to share my story. So here I am in my bed. Here I am in my bed about to share my money story with you. So I think that, I was raised by a single mom, and my parents split up when I was 2. And my mom was an alcoholic and a drug addict, and so was my father. And my mom got sober when I was 5 years old. And so life was really, really tumultuous up until that point, until I was 5. And then after she got sober, she actually married a man who was really, really extremely physically abusive to her. And I experienced quite a significant amount of trauma, around ages, probably from like 5 to 7-ish. I think she ended up divorcing him when I was I think maybe I was 8 years old when she divorced him finally. But he was really physically abusive, and I witnessed a lot of physical abuse, in my house, and had a lot of trauma because of that. But for me, growing up, money was just, my mom always busted her ass. She worked her ass off to give me everything that I needed, but she also had a tremendous amount of guilt because of what I had been through and what I had witnessed in the early years of my life. So she definitely, spent money on me and gave me gifts, as a way to sort of help her guilt go away. And so while she was always giving, it was from this place of like feeling guilty, needing to give, to like giving to make up for, if that makes sense. And so, and that, obviously the feelings associated with that were just kind of shitty. And so, and again, like she worked really, really hard. She would have multiple jobs. I spent a lot of time alone as I was a latchkey kid. As soon as I could go home from school on my own, I was going home from school on my own, spending lots of time by myself and on my own. And she was always worried about money. She was always stressed about money. And she always worked really, really hard for money. And when I was a freshman, in between my 8th grade and my freshman year in high school, she got divorced again, and she decided to go back to school. And she went back. She had a master's and had almost gotten a PhD, right when I was born. And so she went back to get another master's in social work. And so she was in school while I was a freshman in high school. And again, like, you know, she just always made it work. And there was always, you know, I always had the things that I wanted. We lived in a middle-class neighborhood. I definitely had friends that were a lot wealthier than I was, but I never really felt like we were poor. You know, I know that she struggled a lot more than she let on. But my belief system around money was certainly that you had to work really, really hard to get money. And definitely that you would need higher education in order to be paid well. My mom was a kind of a perpetual student. She was always learning. She was always reading. And like I said, went back, you know, when I was a freshman in high school to get her master's in social work. So, yeah, it was like secondary education was a must. You had to work really hard to make money. And even in working hard, things were going to be a struggle. So that's kind of like what I was brought up with. There also was just not a lot of stability. My mom was married 5 times over the years, and there wasn't a lot of stability. There was no stability really around like a paternal or father figure. My dad was not in the picture. So after she left him when I was 2 years old, he was not in the picture and, you know, never provided for or supported me in any way. And so definitely like some abandonment stuff there and some like worthiness, the worthiness shit there, right, was like pretty intense. You know, I think I just grew up with these patterns of like that I wasn't enough, that I wasn't loved, and that I wasn't worthy. That was the emotional conditioning that I got. And not from my mom, right? But from the rest of the family that was around me, and definitely the situation with my dad. Growing up, I felt like I was really, really lucky because my mom would always tell me, you can be anything you want to be. You know, 2 things I think that like really helped shape me were from the time I can remember her telling me that, it's more important to be beautiful inside than it is outside. Or that it's equally, you know, that beauty inside is equally as important as beauty outside. But usually it's more important to be beautiful inside than to be beautiful outside. So that was something that she always told me on repeat, that really stuck with me. And then this other thing of that I could be anything that I wanted to be. And even though her actions didn't show that she believed that, it was said enough to me that it was imprinted in me. And so I'm really, really grateful to her for that, because those 2 things were, you know, I think had a lot to do with where I am right now in my life. And my ability to believe that I can create anything that I desire, right? Because I was told that I could from a really young age. So thanks to my mother for that. So, you know, she was in abusive relationships. She was in unhealthy relationships. She was not good at relationships. And as a result, I just really didn't want to have relationship. I didn't want to be in relationship. Like you know, she also raised me to be fiercely independent and that I didn't need a man and that I could do anything on my own. And so from a very young age, and also because of some trauma that I experienced in a physical altercation that she had with one of her husbands, my primary question until, you know, I was in my late 30s was, how do I survive on my own? And that made my life really difficult, and it made relationships for me really difficult, especially like romantic relationships, because I was just like, nope, how do I survive on my own? How do I survive on my own? That was the question that my brain on repeat was asking itself at every moment of every day, and every action that I did was determined by that. So not a lot of stability growing up. We moved a lot. And so as I came into adulthood, well, when I got to be about 13 or 14, I completely rebelled. My mom is a hippie. She was like uber spiritual. Like she was into, like, she's full woo, right? And I was like, at 13 was like, I don't want any part of that. I'm going to be the total opposite. She's a diehard Democrat. I'm going to be a Republican. I'm going to go make money. Everything's about money. Like, everything's about business and money. And that's all I wanted. I didn't want anything having to do with any of the stuff that she was involved in. That was the 13-year-old rebel against your mother, right? And so when it came time for me to graduate from high school, I wanted to go and leave and go to college. And I got accepted to a Black female university called Dillard. And I really wanted to go. And the relationship with my mom and my feeling like I needed to stay and take care of her, we had a lot of enmeshment in our relationship, led me to not going and doing that. And I stayed home and I went to a small university in Salt Lake City and got more resentful and more resentful and more resentful. And finally at 19, I was like, fuck this shit. I'm out of here. And I packed up everything I owned and I moved to New York City with a guy that I had met that I had only known for like 2 months. So I moved to New York, and that's really when everything began to change for me because, and it is absolutely when and like, there's a whole other like, parallel story here around like my gifts and my spiritual gifts. That's not really what this call's about. So maybe I'll tell that over in my spiritual gifts intensive or something. But I had shut down my spiritual gifts really young, around 6 or 7, around another trauma that happened. And had been pretty, like, had everything pretty well shut off, except for like my clear cognizance, like my knowing was always with me. So I land myself in New York City, and I just like, this is when like my manifestation skills really began to heighten. So like I land in New York City, I'm 19 years old. I get a job at United Media, which is the largest newspaper syndicate in the world. And I'm like immediately assigned to, the licensing department, and I'm working with Peanuts and Dilbert, like their largest clients, and was in quality control. And then like right after that landed an amazing job with a company called ROI Marketing that was helping ISL Marketing, who was at the time the global marketing partner for FIFA, put on Women's World Cup in the United States. So these opportunities were just falling into my lap, and I was making money. I was living on my own in New York City. My mom was still supporting me financially because New York was so expensive. And our relationship was still very, very enmeshed. So my mom was financially supporting me and helping me out while I was doing all of this. But having tons of financial success and career success and just manifesting stuff left and right, right? And like having these amazing career opportunities be presented to me, and me basically just being like, oh, I just have good business instincts. Well, no, I had spiritual gifts, right? It was just like, I didn't realize that it was that at the time. So then I started working in the entertainment industry, and I, was working with like almost all of the major record labels, doing grassroots marketing, promo parties, platinum parties, helping new artists launch their careers, basically. And I did that for a couple of years. And then I moved back to Utah, and then I moved to LA, moved back to Utah for 3 years. Then I moved to LA, to pursue a singing career, and which then began to go really, really well. And then I got pregnant with my middle son. And I have an older son, but he's not my biological. So I got pregnant with Josiah, and ended up coming back to Salt Lake. And during this time, like during my early 20s, like money was something that was just very fluid. Like sometimes I would be struggling, but I don't really feel like any more than any other 20-year-old. And I had a string of very emotionally unavailable boyfriends that were quite wealthy, that would send me all kinds of money, take care of my bills, pay things for me. And then I really started making good money. And my mom and I were working together in a consulting company that was making ridiculous amounts of money in Los Angeles. And so at this point, my relationship with money started changing a little bit. And I was like, wow, money's actually not that hard to make. Like money can be made really easily. And I also started really being opened up to the world of not just professional artists and athletes, which had been a really ingrained part of my life for multiple years, but to like regular people, in my mind, regular people that were making lots of money. And and up until that point, I was like, it was like middle class. And then there were athletes and artists that were making lots and lots of money, but that's really all I had been exposed to. So at this point in my, mid to late 20s, I start to really be exposed to regular people easily making money. And I'm like, there's something to this. So meanwhile, because of the instability of my childhood, when I get pregnant with Josiah, I decide like I'm going all in on being like the best mom ever, who's going to be like the most traditional. Like I'm going to do everything that I'm going to give him everything that I didn't have, which in my mind was stability and security. And so possessions and things and status and all of that became really, really important to me. Traditions, I wanted him to be able to go to the best private schools. I wanted to be part of the PTA. And like, I started putting all of this extreme amount of pressure on myself to be the perfect mom, right? His biological father was in the entertainment industry, and I got a really amazing child support, settlement. And so I was able to not work for 18 months. And then when I went back to work, was being supported fairly well financially until he decided to stop paying. And some of you know that I'm actually, funny enough, full circle, going to Atlanta next week for a child support trial, because he's about $350,000 arrears in child support currently. So basically all the emotional conditioning started really imprinting and really affecting my life in my, about this time, right? About the time that I'm 28, 29 years old. And so I come back to Utah to raise Josiah the right way. I give up on my music industry, my singing career dreams. I come back to get to raise him, and then end up going to work in the family business, which is addiction treatment. Ultimately end up opening my own sober living home with my mom, and then another which was a nonprofit, and then opening a for-profit laboratory, drug testing laboratory, and outpatient program with my husband and my mother. And those ended up being quite successful, but I was busting my ass. I was working so hard. And not only was I working hard at work, but I was working hard at being the perfect mom, and then the perfect wife, and then the perfect stepmom, and all the perfect everything, right? And I was fucking miserable. I was miserable. I hated my life. My marriage was a mess. We were on the verge of getting divorced. My husband had an Oxycontin addiction that I didn't know about. And literally, like, I am like this pillar in the addiction treatment community, right? My mom is a pioneer in the addiction treatment industry nationally, and is globally known. And so I'm this pioneer in Utah in the addiction treatment industry. And my husband has a Oxycontin addiction and ends up having to go to treatment and robs a bar. I mean, it's just like, that is another story for another time also, but literally like on Oxycontin, breaks into a bar, gets arrested. It's in the news. And then ends up having to go to treatment. My life is just like fucking miserable. And about this time, I'm having my spiritual reawakening at the same time, right? It's like the shit's hitting the fan. I'm miserable. I'm like, this is fucked. And so, yeah, I'm telling my money story, but like now I feel like this could be like a 2-hour story, right? That I'm telling right now. That's like, I tried to squeeze into like 45 minutes. I'm like, that was a joke. There might have to be a part 2 because I have a client call in 15 minutes. I need to write my book is what really needs to happen. But, okay. So where was I? Life falling apart. Yeah. So I had begun to have my spiritual reawakening. I had started having past life memories of like being a witch, like, really spiritual gifts starting to wake up, all kinds of crazy shit happening, like, and had begun hosting women's circles at my house, like a coven, basically coven circles at my house, with a group of women that were really close to me and were my friends. And at one point I called on Kali and I was like, I'm miserable. I'm like, and I didn't, and my girlfriend was like, I don't know if you want to do that. Like, I don't know if you fully understand what that means. And I'm like, no, it'll be fine. Literally, like within 3 months, my successful business fucking implodes. Like, and at this time, like, our kids are in private school. We are living in a like ridiculously huge 6,500 multi-million-dollar mansion. I mean, I had achieved everything that I wanted to achieve regarding status and money and all of that. And I was fucking miserable. So everything implodes, like implodes. We lose the businesses. We lose $3 million. We end up $1 million in debt. We lose our house. We lose one of our cars. And by that time, Sean has gotten sober and our relationship is rebuilding and getting back together. And we decide to have another baby, and we have Jack at this point. And literally, like, shit gets so bad that Sean is giving plasma to pay for formula and diapers. And we have no money. And the business is gone. And so we had no idea where like the next amount of money is coming from. Like, it was insane. And so I start getting job offers to go like work for other addiction treatment programs, because I still was like really, really well respected in the industry. I was really good at what I did, even though I hated it. And I was like, the thought of going to work for another addiction treatment program or even staying in the addiction treatment industry, like, made me want to poke myself in the eyeball with a steak knife. I was like, I fucking cannot do that. And at this point, I had already begun building my business. And so this was like when everything totally tanked. It was, oh my God. So May of 2016. So just coming up on 3 years ago, which is crazy. But so it took about 6 months for everything to fully implode. And it was probably a year that it was coming. And I had started my coaching business a year prior. So I'd been doing these classes and I'd been doing all these things like in the evenings and in my off time and seeing clients, for a year. And then I officially went all in 3 years ago, which is crazy. It seems like so much longer. So the business has been around about 4 years, but I've been all in for 3. We had a billing software error. Or corruption. Our billing software was corrupt, and then got taken advantage of by a like shark lender. That's a really long story in and of its own, but essentially, a billing software corruption led to like accounts receivable not coming in from insurance companies, and then it just collapsed. So I was like, nope, I'm going all in on this coaching business thing. I'm going to go on all this coaching business. It's like the only thing in my life that makes me happy, you know, aside from like my kids at the time. My marriage was a mess. I was like, no, I'm going all in. I'm doing this. And it was like the craziest leap of faith because I had no idea where the next money was coming from. And I was making, you know, maybe $1,000 a month coaching, sometimes 2,000 on like a really good month, but it was nowhere near enough money to support my family. And it was just this crazy, it was this crazy chain of events that was like the best thing that ever happened to me. And so okay, I've got 10 minutes. I'm going to have to come back and do part 2. So it's this crazy chain of events. I go all in on my business and things just like, I mean, the business, like the alignment and the synchronicities from the business, from doing the business, like going all in on the business were like, the universe immediately showed me I was in the right place and that I was doing the right thing. And the next year of our life was still fucking hell. Like, it was so difficult. And we're still dealing with the aftermath of that. Like, we're still dealing with the settling of that business and handling that business debt. I mean, like, there's a lot that happened in that year of like everything imploding that, you know, we've been dealing with long term. And still, I'm like so fucking grateful that happened. It's the best thing that's ever happened to me in my life. So I go all in on my business and I do a retreat in October of 2017. October of 2017, I do a retreat in New Orleans with Alexa Martinez, who is the founder of the Kaleidoscope. We do this Violet Alchemy retreat. And at that retreat, I meet Dane Thomas. And at the time by that time, like my business was, in online business standards, I had been ridiculously successful in a short amount of time. I was having 10K months at that point. I was having, I was making like $10,000 to $12,000 a month at that point. But it was really inconsistent. It was probably averaging 10 to 12,000. It was really inconsistent. My money was up and down. My marriage was falling apart. I was all in on my business and my business was on a huge upward swing trajectory. Right. So I do this retreat and I meet Dane Thomas and I meet Dane Thomas and I'm like instantly have this like soul connection to him. And he within 15 minutes of meeting each other, he takes me through a mother whore quadrant clear. So a quadrant is like where you look at opposing things and then you clear being okay with and not. So like, I'm okay with being a mother and I'm okay with being a whore. So I'm okay with being a whore and not being a mother. I'm okay with being a mother and not being a whore. I'm okay with being neither a mother and a whore. And I'm okay with being both a mother and a whore at the same time. So this was around like issues that were happening in my marriage and like me being like having this little toddler that I was still nursing and like being really disconnected from my husband. And so anyway, like I meet this guy within 15 minutes. He's taking me through this clear. He took me through like 3 other clears over the weekend, rocked my fucking world, and everything began to shift for me. So by the 3rd day of the retreat, I'm like, I don't know what this spiral thing is that you're speaking of. Well, he had this business mastermind called Alchemy and then the spiral. And I was like, I want all the things. I want all the Dane things. Like, I don't care what it's going to cost. Give me all the things. And at this point, I had made coaching investments in myself, but I had only made, it was only like 1,000 here or 2,000 there. And so I'm like, I don't care. Like, I already know I want to do the spiral. I already know I want to be a spiral practitioner. I didn't even fucking know what spiral was. The emotional clearing had like completely rocked my world that weekend. And I'm like, I'm fucking all in. I don't care what it costs. Let me know. So I end up making a 5-figure investment with Dane and like literally almost got divorced because of it. I think because my husband was just like, what in the actual fuck? And who is this dude? And what are you talking about? And then I start going through the spiral and my entire life changed. I started going through the spiral with Dane and concurrently was doing, money and wealth resonance clears with each of my spiral levels with Dane. And my money just kept going up and up and up. And my business was getting more successful and more successful and more successful. And spiral was like radically changing and transforming every single thing in my life. Like everything. I need to like make a list of all the things that happened, but like I had frozen shoulder when I started spiral that was gone by level 5 when Dane told me it would be. Like physical things, non-physical things, emotional things. But the biggest thing for me is I just released all of the expectations on myself. Like I no longer felt like I had to be a perfect mother. I no longer felt like I had to be a perfect wife or a perfect human. Like I started accepting myself exactly as I am in all of my imperfections. And I started honoring who I was and what I had been through and recognizing my value and knowing that like I was doing, like really knowing that I was doing my purpose work and owning my spiritual gifts and not being afraid to like share them with the world and owning like the full witchiness and owning all the magic. And, I cannot tell you how powerful the spiral is. And it is not something to be fucked around with. It is not something to play with. And please do not take yourself through the spiral. Because it's fucking serious, heavy work. It is intense. And spiral practitioners are trained to take you through the process. They're trained to help you along the way. They're trained to help you with the reframe questions. They're trained to help you with integration activities, and they're there to support you. It's really something I would never recommend somebody do on their own. So I have 2 spots open for Spiral right now. I'm taking 2 people. And I probably won't take people again until June, but I've got 2 spots available. So if you're like listening to this and you're like, fuck yes, I have to do the Spiral, message me or Mallory and we can get you the information. I take people through, my version of Spiral, which is Tempo. It is the Spiral, but you watch the videos in pre-recorded, like the content section is pre-recorded and you watch that and then you do your clearings one-on-one with me. The container is epic. We've had like the most radical transformations in there. It's just like amazing. And I love it so much. And it's a really affordable way to do the Spiral. So it's $2,222 and there's a 5-month payment plan available as well, if you're interested in that. So if you want that information, message Mallory and she can help you or me and we can get you the details on it. But, yeah, it was so transformative. And I still say to this day, I'm like, I would sell every single thing I own right now to go through the Spiral again for the first time. And I mean it, like it was that transformational for me. And it changed my life that much. And then I think the second most powerful thing I've ever done, and it is the most powerful spiritual work I've ever done. And I think the second most powerful spiritual work I've ever done is the quantum clears that I did at my advanced practitioner training. So the Mother Father quantum clear and the God and Satan quantum clears. And you can't do a quantum clear unless you've been through the Spiral. So you have to do the Spiral first. But I'm an entirely different human. I'm an entirely different person. I am so much more self-assured. I am so much more confident. I am so much easier on myself. And I'm so much better at everything because of it, which is what's crazy. Like everything in my life has improved. My relationship with my kids is a million times better than it was. I get to actually be their mom now instead of their like warden or dictator. And I spend real time with them now doing things that they actually give a shit about instead of like spending my time with them in PTA or like doing their laundry or making sure that like they have a perfect life. Shit that they never even cared about. My friendships are stronger. My relationships are amazing. And that all comes from the self-responsibility that comes with the Spiral and that comes with emotional clearing. Being able to look at your own shit, being able to face your own triggers, being able to engage in mirror theory work, and being accountable to your fucking self and responsible for your fucking self will radically fucking transform your life. I'm so grateful. And it's part of why I did this class. And it's part of why I charged so little for this class. And it's part of why I did, put so much of myself and my energy into this class is that I feel like I want to give back. This work has been magical in my life. And it's so much more powerful than it seems. And it shouldn't be taken lightly and it shouldn't be taken for granted. And, it's pure magic. And it's even better now that it's a certified therapeutic modality and that, the world is actually recognizing how powerful it is and how much it works. And so being able to share this with you in this class was a real gift for me too, because I want to expose the world to the Spiral modality of emotional clearing, because I believe that we all have the power to transform our own lives. I think every fucking person on the planet should go through the Spiral. It would be a much, much different world. So in relation to money and how Spiral has changed my entire relationship to money. I no longer believe I have to work hard for money. I no longer believe I'm not deserving and worthy of it. One of the big things for me was I was always ending at the end of the month with $0 in my bank account. Didn't matter how much I made. I always ended up at zero. And I would have these huge fluctuations. Sometimes I'd have a ton of money. Sometimes I'd have no money. It'd be like living high, broke, right? And that all had to do with my emotional conditioning and my programming. All of it. And now as I sink deeper and deeper into wealth consciousness work, I am like, I have really begun to see how powerful this work can be. So I'm going to come back for part 2 because I have a client session right now. Oh my gosh, I love it. And my thing goes out right when I say that. So I'm going to come back for part 2 because I have a client session right now. I'm going to be talking more specifically about the money part of my story and how emotional clearing has impacted that. So thanks for spending this time with me and hearing all about my life. We will talk so soon. See you soon. Mwah.
That's a wrap. I hope you enjoyed the show. Make sure to connect with me on social media and reach out. I love hearing from you. And if you want more of me, real, raw, and uncensored, make sure to join the Wealth Witch Telegram channel. It's my free channel where I share all of my random daily musings as well as the information that I feel like is important and pertinent to my community. We've put a link to the Telegram channel in the show notes, so make sure to come join us over there if that intrigues you. Remember, wealth is a mindset, and you are the most powerful creator in your reality. Until next time, this is the Wealth Witch signing off.
Freedom.